Since posting a video of me installing a DIY air source heat pump mini split, I've had a few questions asking how I avoided having an unsightly pipe coil behind the outdoor unit, and asking how I made joints in the pipe set. So this is just a short video showing how I managed to make the various joints in the pipe set that's supplied with the mini split. This joint that I'm showing here is a flare joint. This is typically the type of joint used to connect the pipe set to the isolating valves on the outdoor unit of the mini split. Basically, it's a manipulative compression fitting made up of a female flare on the end of a piece of copper pipe, held in place by a brass nut onto a male brass fitting. There are various pipe flaring tools on the market, both manual and electric. I am only using manual tools here, as I couldn't justify buying an electric pipe flaring tool for a DIY installation. This tool here, although it will create a flare, it's not really quite what you need to do the job. This is more suited to car braking systems. I did give this tool a go, but it's not really suited for this sort of application. This tool here seems to do the job, but I find it a little bit unreliable. It's quite simple to use. You just clamp the pipe in the pipe clamp there, then you engage the cone into the pipe, and then you just basically tighten it down until you can't tighten it anymore. So firstly, I deburr the pipe with a pair of pin nose pliers. It's not so much as a deburr as just I ream it out a little bit. Then before I go any further, I slip the nut over the pipe, making sure the nut is the right way round. I then put the pipe into the clamp and tighten the clamp up reasonably tight. As you can see, I'm keeping the pipe approximately 2 millimeters above the top of the clamp. In the next step, I just slide the tool over the clamp, engage the cone with the end of the pipe, and then just start tightening it down. I just tighten it down until it can't go any further, and then it's just a case of backing it off and releasing the pipe from the clamp, and the flare is formed. At first glance, it seems to have done quite a good job, but on closer inspection, it's not quite like the real thing. This that I'm showing you now is the factory made or factory supplied flare, and you can see how well that fits on the end of the brass fitting. So for identification purposes, I'm going to mark this number 1. As you can see, the two compared together, apart from those marks on the pipe, which is my fault because the pipe is not completely round, I'm going to mark this number 2. The number 2 is not quite as good as the factory supplied one. So I'm going to cut that off and form another flare with a different tool. So although the number 2 flare would possibly work, the actual formed flare hasn't got quite as much surface area as I would like. With this particular tool, there is a limit to the size of flare that can be formed on the end of the pipe. Here you can see it's not quite as good as the factory supplied flare. After removing the previous flare, I just checked to make sure the nut will still go over the pipe. Now this pipe flaring tool I got from Amazon for a good price of £33. As you can see, the kit comprises of the tool itself, a clamp and a pipe cutter. This pipe flaring tool works in a very similar way to the previous tool, where the clamp grips the pipe and the tool, this time it tightens down onto the clamp. Here I'm showing how the cone on the tool is slightly off centre. This isn't a fault, this is the design of the tool. So once again, this tool's pretty self-explanatory. I use it in more or less the same way as I used the last tool. So I fit the pipe into the correct size orifice, if you like, and make sure that I've got enough protruding above the top of the clamp. But first, I ream the pipe. Then I make sure the nut is on the right way and that it moves freely. I then put the pipe back into the clamp and press it tightly. It kind of grips the pipe at this point, and I make sure that the pipe is protruding above the clamp at approximately the right distance. So then I slide the tool over the clamp. As you can see here, there's little dimples on the top of the clamp, or on the edge of the clamp, and the tool slides over and these dimples locate the kind of locking device that screws down into one of the dimples, makes it secure. Then I locate the cone into the end of the pipe just to make sure before I do the final tightening up. So I make sure that clamp's really tight. Then as before, I just carry on tightening down the tool. Now with this particular tool, there's like a clutch on it, so when it has gone the right distance, it kind of slips and you can't tighten it anymore. And there it goes, it slips. Then it's just a case of reversing the tool off, sliding it off the clamp, and then inspecting the flare that's being formed. I can see straight away this isn't a very good flare. There's some sort of serrations around the edges and it looks a little bit big, and it is a bit big because, as you can see, the nut won't go over it. It's much bigger than the factory supplied flare. So as I'm short of pipe, I'm going to have to cut this failed attempt off. I'm going to do this with the pipe cutter supplied. Now if you've ever wondered what these grooves in the rollers of the pipe cutters are for, it's to accommodate a flare so that you can cut the flare off as close to the end as possible. Now it's just a case of going through the flare forming process again, but this time getting it right. The mistake I made in the last attempt was that I had too much pipe protruding above the clamp. I was wondering, if you haven't already subscribed, perhaps you would consider subscribing. It's free and it helps give incentive to create more content. Thank you. On this attempt it seems to have gone okay. The flare looks pretty good. It sits on the male part of the fitting very well, and apart from the marks from the clamp on the pipe, it looks like a very good flare. Considering the object of the exercise is to have as much of the flared surface in contact with the brass male surface, I think this does the job. Compared to the factory supplied flare, it's very similar. So that's it. Brazing a joint next.